Kia ora and welcome to the second Patreon episode of the Niche Cast. We are recording these for our Patreons who support us via Patreon, and we're going to record 3 episodes and share them out for everyone. And then after the 3 episodes, we will put this behind our little Patreon page, and you'll have to sign up to Patreon to get access to these episodes of the Patreon Niche Cast, where myself and the Wildcard just talk a bunch of shit about various topics around our own worlds. We do have a new Patreon. Shout out to Suzanne Jean Penfold, who joins a stellar cast of Patreons. Terry Thomas, Ratanka Chakraborty, Rowan Edwards, Samuel Greer have all jumped on board this year. Jason Huang as well. Got quite a little crew of Patrons supporting the Niche Case who make a lot of this possible, so shout out to you. And that's why we're doing these episodes of the Niche Cast just for our Patrons, to give something back to our Patrons and provide them with extra value and extra content for their generosity in keeping the Niche Case afloat. Wildcard, how's it trucking up in the naughty north of Aotearoa?
A lot of trucks up in the naughty north of Aotearoa, I'll say that. So trucking substantially, I think, is the correct word. Substantially.
Is the winter bite hitting the north as well?
I've been well and truly bitten by the winter bite. That's no lie. They told me it was a winterless north. It's not quite true. Winter did hold off for a long while. There's a bloody drought for half the time, but yeah, it seems to rain every single day these days. Hopefully not for much longer, because we're starting to get a little more heat in the days. So I think we're rounding the corner towards the beautiful springtime.
Beautiful springtime indeed. We don't know where this conversation is going to head, and we do have a habit of going fully deep into the funky zone that we dwell in. But I do want to start our conversation for the second episode of the Niche Cast Patreon podcast, Wildcard, talking about international basketball, because there's an interesting dynamic with basketball that I think a lot of people, especially in the USA, don't quite understand. They feel it because there's now more international players in the NBA than there has been ever, perhaps in a long time, especially those who contribute at a high level. The NBA and basketball is increasing in popularity around the world. We've seen it here in Aotearoa. Basketball's popularity in Aotearoa is soaring, and I think it's just kind of in keeping with the trend internationally of the standing and popularity of basketball around the world. That growth and that rise is kind of juxtaposed against the NBA players not competing in international basketball as other countries would. Now, that's an understandable situation, considering we've seen it with Steven Adams ourselves, and we have also, the American players are the best players in the world, thus makes USA the best basketball team in the world, and to be honest, USA could send their B or C team and still win a World Cup. That's the backdrop here as we are approaching a basketball World Cup, and a whole lot of NBA players have made themselves unavailable because they would rather prepare for the upcoming season with their NBA teams. So it's this weird situation, Wildcard, that I want to get your thoughts on, because, as I said, internationally, basketball is in a fantastic space. We're seeing it here in Aotearoa. We're on the front lines. Basketball is immensely strong. The popularity of the NBA is incredible. The quality of basketball played internationally is on the rise, and I think we're going to have a fun basketball World Cup because there's going to be a lot of competitive teams, and obviously the USA is still going to be competitive as well. But then there's still this kind of disparity or disconnect between the international game and the NBA to some extent. How do you feel about that situation, specifically with regards to basketball, international basketball, and the NBA? Like, take Aotearoa out of the equation. I just want your thoughts on the international scene and how it aligns or is disjointed from the NBA.
Well, I don't think the American team missing as many players as they are, and it's crazy how many they are missing because you've just had this sort of like a domino effect, eh? It's like a few people pull out and then suddenly other guys are like, well, if he's not playing, then I don't really need to be playing either. And I think that's really what it's been. A couple guys like Kyle Lowry pulled out this week because he's coming off-season surgery and he thought he was going to be ready, but he just had, he's been told by the doctors, nah, you're not quite there yet, so it's best if you skip this one. There's a few situations like that where guys are injured. There's also been situations where guys who will never get another chance to play for America, in all likelihood, have turned down opportunities to play because they're prioritizing the NBA season. So I can't help but feel like, obviously, that sort of overall representing your country sort of aspect to it that you see in other sports, and the sort of thing that people have chucked at Steven Adams a lot through, dumb people have chucked at Steven Adams a lot because they don't understand the context behind all this. That's a factor in America. I think it's just peer pressure, really. I think it's just if LeBron James isn't playing, if Steph Curry isn't playing, if James Harden and Russell Westbrook and Paul George and these guys aren't playing, well, Kawhi Leonard's not playing, well, why should I play? If the best guys don't want to play, then I'm not gonna. So I think that's really what's going on. I don't think it's the worst thing for the World Cup, though, because it makes America, they're still going to be favourites. They're still going to probably have the best team. If you look at just even having like mid-tier NBA talent on their roster, well, that's better than what most other countries have, especially when you can do that from like 1 to 15 on that roster. So, clearly they're still going to be extremely competitive, but it makes them beatable all of a sudden. I think that's going to, maybe for the integrity of the World Cup, it's a little bit rough, but for the competitive nature of it, I think it's fantastic. And I think that overall makes for a better, international game, really. I think when America are taking it seriously, that's good for international basketball too. But when they take their eye off the ball, it gives other teams a chance to really sharpen up. But I will say, don't underestimate Team America under the guidance of Greg Popovich, who, as we know, over the last, 20 years of the NBA, he is the absolute master of getting the best out of his role players. And if he's got an entire team full of role players plus, like, Kemba Walker, I think they're probably going to do all right, to be honest. So, still favourites to win. But what's funky about this is, okay, Canada have also fallen prey to the same thing as America have had. Canada with a large tier of NBA players, more than they've ever had before, like could easily have been the strongest team they've ever sent to a World Cup. None of those buggers are going to be there. And so they've got a team full of guys who, like, half of them you don't even recognize the names. So they're like, suddenly they're nowhere near as strong as you thought they might be. And they've suffered from just that whole, like, NBA players pulling out thing a lot more than anywhere else. But the weird thing here, and it's also a great thing, is that it seems like while Canada have caught the bug from America, none of those Euro teams have. All these European teams, for the most part, when guys are available, they seem to be being able to pick pretty much close to their best players. Not everyone's named their World Cup squads yet, so we can't say for sure. But I mean, it looks like Spain will probably have Marc Gasol and Ricky Rubio. I don't think they'll have Serge Ibaka, who does represent Spain internationally, even though he's from the Congo. Serbia's got an outstanding team. They're going to have Nikola Jokic. They just across the board, teams like that. Giannis Antetokounmpo, the MVP, is going to be playing against the Tall Blacks for Greece. Like, those European teams seem, for the most part, to have been able to coax their guys in. And I think there's sort of the influence of those Eurobasket sort of teams, but also the culture of Eurobasket has definitely taken a bit of hold in the NBA over the last few years, and Greg Popovich with the Spurs was probably the first person to really embrace that. So it's kind of fun seeing that coming back the other way now. And I just think it's going to make for a really, really enjoyable World Cup because you've got so many teams who, like, the teams in that second tier are as stacked as they could be, and the team at the very top just isn't. And I think everything's leveled out nicely, which it's going to be tough for the All Blacks trying to get results, but it's going to be great for international basketball overall. I think it's going to be a pretty enjoyable World Cup.
How do you assess the standing of basketball in Aotearoa, considering we've had a bit of drama with the Auckland City team and just shenanigans and how that's been run at a school, at a college, high school level? The national tournament is doing fantastically well. We've got a fairly solid Tall Blacks team. How are you just assessing basketball's standing in Aotearoa at the moment?
I mean, it's still on the rise, isn't it? And on the rise is a great thing, but it is going to come with a few teething issues. And I think the NBL is getting to a point of sustainability, and I think they made good strides last year, but still most of those franchises don't have much money, and it's a struggle for consistency year on end there. So there's things that need to be worked out. The most important thing I can't help but feel with all of these growing leagues, I think of the New Zealand Football Premiership as well. I even to an extent would chuck the NPC Rugby in this category. Like, it's all about just getting the fans involved, and if to get the fans involved you need the media involved, and the more coverage, and it's not just the coverage, it's how you frame that coverage. It's like the NPC gets heaps of coverage, well, Mitre 10 Cup, whatever they call it these days, heaps of coverage, all the games are live on telly and all this, but it just doesn't always seem like the most enthusiastic coverage. It's certainly from beyond Sky Sports. I think the news teams tend to treat it as a bit of like matter-of-factly just rolling through the thing, whereas I watched Northland last week and was thinking this is fun, enjoyable rugby. I enjoyed that more than I did the All Blacks game, to be honest. And like, just getting at that grassroots side of thing and that cultural side and that very Kiwi nature of it, that's where you gotta be pumping the energy. And if you do that, you fill it up. You get things really exploding onto the scene there like that. And the Football Premiership is the same. It needs coverage. It needs positive coverage. It needs people just to stop worrying and picking on the negatives and just say, like, these are enjoy it for what it is. And the basketball, I think a lot of people do enjoy it for what it is, so they're a little step ahead. They've just got to keep growing and drawing in the crowds and getting people involved, I think. And if you've got a strong grassroots, you're going to have a strong sort of elite level. And if you have a strong elite level but not the strong grassroots, well, that strong elite level is not going to be very sustainable. So that's sort of my theory on the matter, is you just got to keep pumping in the energy at the base level, really.
It's an interesting idea, because all of those leagues in Aotearoa have the same kind of basic resource. And we talked about Sky Sport last episode, in episode 1, and all of the domestic leagues, they have to rely on Sky Sport to some extent, and they all kind of have to go through the same channels to do what they want to do. And that's a very interesting something to ponder, is just how these domestic competitions are being run and organized in New Zealand, because no competition really stands out above the rest. Like I agree with you. Like, NPC Rugby is the best form of rugby. It's the most interesting. It's just the coolest. It's the most wholesome rugby we have, and that is probably viewed as being ahead of the pack. But that's only because it's rugby, and anything rugby in New Zealand has that standing there. So if you take away the rugby factor, I'd say the NPC is on the same level as all the other competitions, but no competition is really going above and beyond to be the best domestic competition in New Zealand, which is, it might be concerning. I just more find it interesting because everything is up for grabs. Like, if you went full hundies into trying to dominate the New Zealand market with your domestic competition, you could do it very easily, because the competition, it's a competition of mediocrity, of status quo. No one's willing to change that status quo, and so everything's at a level playing field. If you make some drastic changes and you go above and beyond to broadcast, or just come up with creative ideas on how to run your domestic competition, you could have a large portion of the market. And I'm also thinking here about domestic cricket, all sports that have some sort of high caliber domestic competition. I don't really think anyone is making the most of what they could do, and side observation from that is that all the domestic competitions are kind of floating around the same space, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. It makes perfect sense, and even with the rugby example, it's true. Like, it is propped up just by generic New Zealand rugby culture. I have one thought on that, and then one question to throw back at you. The thought is that the NBL seem to have made big strides in the last year. Obviously, there are aspects that got left behind with some of the financial struggles from a couple of the teams, some of the just organizational struggles in a couple matters. I mean, these are things you iron out over time. But it's certainly, those are not new. Those are not new problems for the league. They were things that were already there. So why did the NBL seem to make such a big stride over the last season? Well, I think it's largely down to the fact that, they started streaming games on their own. I think the year before they had them on the Herald. This time, I think they were working with Tribe Sports app. I'm not 100% sure on that. But then, after a while, Sky Sport came and started sort of simulcasting those streams on their channels, which is nice from Sky Sport because they didn't really have to pay the production values anywhere near like they're doing for other stuff, so it's nice and easy for them. And then they fully broadcast the finals weekend at the end there. And along with that, you also had those streams came with nice little commentaries. They also came with I think we got to give a lot of credit to old mate Hugh Bainan doing a lot of work there, sort of on the ground level as a Sky Sports reporter. And that podcast he does with other old mate Andrew Price, who's been a good bugger for us, sharing a few things on Twitter and such. Like that podcast that they did was quite good as well for promoting things. And these are things that give credibility to the league. They're not really things that were. This isn't them relying on Sky Sports. This is just interested people going out there and taking it upon themselves to do these things. And I think that's a pretty good instruction booklet for everyone else, especially considering that the NBL, the basketball league, was starting at certainly a lower standpoint than the NPC or certain others. And speaking of certain others, this is where my question comes in for you. Where do you think the Plunket Shield / domestic cricket sits in this situation? Because you said none stand out above the rest, and my immediate thought was, I wonder about the Plunket Shield. Maybe the Plunket Shield is a little higher. They have an advantage, obviously, over some others because it's it's sort of like a step up from straight domestic. It's sort of like, to take the rugby example, it's somewhere in between Super Rugby and NPC, but at the same time, they've cut back on the rounds as of last season, continuing into this season, I believe. So there's a couple less games, and there's always some New Zealand cricket shenanigans when it comes to money and funding the domestic games. So maybe these things are holding it back. I don't know. But where do you think the Plunket Shield / domestic cricket sits within this wider situation?
I think they are definitely on the same level. That is because you kind of alluded to them possibly being on a slightly higher level. I think there is not enough information floating around for anyone to care, and that means that it's on the same level. Like, we are the only real outlet that puts effort and resource into covering domestic cricket, and it works out great for us because we do put that effort in to cover domestic cricket. But there's no effort, like even from New Zealand cricket, they are doing nothing to actually promote Plunket Shield cricket. Like there's no initiatives, there's no creativity, there's no going above and beyond their status quo to reinvigorate Plunket Shield cricket specifically for Trophy and Super Smash are slightly easier to digest, so they can, get some broadcasting on Sky Sports or just have a bit more media attention thrown their way. But the situation in domestic cricket is how it is because New Zealand cricket have done nothing to change it. They've done nothing to actually develop and enhance the product. They've done nothing to expose it to new audiences and offer the type of, to be honest, we're the only people offering any type of insight and opinion on what is happening in domestic cricket. And that's great for us, but that shows you that nothing else is happening to put it forth into people's minds. Like, most Kiwi sports fans know absolutely nothing about domestic cricket. So when a player joins the Black Caps, they are told, oh, this player did this, and he's, doing this season, and this is his background. But they don't know where that player's come from. They don't know the journey they've been on. They don't know what they offer the Black Caps or specifically why they were selected for the Black Caps, because no one knows about domestic cricket. And domestic cricket is an interesting example because of how little resource is put into enhancing the product.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that Plunket Shield could be number one. It has the potential to be the best, and I don't mean number one in terms of overall numbers, because rugby's always going to dominate that, but the most efficiently run, the most efficiently broadcast, all those things. But you're right, there are, the Herald will have a little recap of results and stuff. They might have the scoreboard, so they might have a little write-up on what happened, maybe a couple quotes from players. Radio Sport, I don't know if they still do live coverage, they used to, but they certainly have updates and stuff like that. But who's actually giving you opinion-based stuff on this? Other than just the results and who's giving you context, who's giving you information about the stuff on a wider scale like that? I mean, we do it, but who else does? Probably, yeah, you're right, probably no one. I mean, it's how I feel writing about the Premiership football as well. It's my job isn't just here to tell you who scored the goals and what's happened. My job is to try put a bit of flavor into this, to make it interesting, to make it fun and appeal to the fans and the people who are following this kind of thing, and just something different, because you need that as well. You need that sort of I don't know, if you're going to have any kind of fan culture about it, you got to empower the fans, don't you? So yeah, I don't know. We have actually had people as well sort of nudging us from cricket circles saying thank you for actually putting a bit of well, I'll use the word flavor again, putting a bit of flavor into things like this. So yeah, it's frustrating, because I really do think that domestic cricket could just surge out in front if they took it a little more seriously. And obviously Plunket Shield's going to be a very hard sell for broadcasters. Okay, we'll cop that one on the chin. Why aren't they streaming everything? How hard is it to, you don't even need commentary, just work on something, just have a live stream there. They're already recording things because they have the video highlights, which are a great resource. It's one of the better things they do. But certainly it feels like if everything I could say about New Zealand cricket here not taking their major domestic competition as seriously as they should, I can say, and then some, about New Zealand football not taking their Premiership as seriously as they should, because it's just as bad there, if not much worse, where it's a little write-up isn't enough. Oh man, like New Zealand football will do, for example, like an example of putting minimum effort in and expecting things to, like, nothing's going to improve if you only put minimum effort in. That's the thing, is it's not just the broadcasting, it's the framing of the broadcasting. You have to tell people to get excited, and they probably will if you tell them to. But like New Zealand football, for example, will do like a player of the week at the end of each round, and 8 times out of 10, it's just the person who scored the most goals. Like, someone scored a hat-trick, they're on lock, done, like, sorted. Player of the week is this person. It's like, obviously nobody in the country has watched all 5 games this week, so it's a little hard to get an exact thing. But like, you can at least try and make it look like you've got some imagination with these things, because otherwise it just looks like somebody gets said, okay, we've got 2 minutes, draw up a graphic, tweet it out, done. Like, let's not think about it. And you can tell these things. You can tell when people undercook it. It's kind of obvious from the outside looking in. So I don't know why people think they can get away with it. I don't know. It's just boring when people don't treat their product with the I don't know, the glamour and the value that they should, because how is anybody else going to if the people in charge don't even bother?
When discussing this episode, you raised an idea that I think ties into all of this, because you were telling me about what you had heard, ideas you had heard about people being, would you say, complacent?
Yeah, complacent's the right word. I remember exactly what the story was now as well. It was on Duncan Trussell's podcast, and he was talking about some city in America where, like, I think a government had been shut down, or the council or something had been shut down, and some local park was just filling up with trash, and people were moaning about it, being like, we've got to sort something out because the park is just full of trash. And he was like, at what point do people not realize that they can go and pick up the trash themselves? Like, how comfortable has your life become? How reliant upon other factors and other people and other resources have you become, that you can't even think to, like, mobilize yourself, you get up there, round up a couple people and say, we're going to go and pick up the trash from the park because it's getting carried away here. Rent a truck or one of those thingies, skip bins for half an afternoon. Done. Put a little effort in. Done. And he was saying, like, how complacent have people become in their lives that this is where they're at, where everyone's waiting for someone else to do something. And I suppose this does tie in, because if you look at what the NBL did, there's a couple of passionate people who really pushed things and took it to a new level, just doing it themselves, and that's all it takes.
Yeah, so you apply that idea, and that's a broader idea that could just lead anywhere in this kind of second half hour of the episode. But if we take it back to the domestic Kiwi sporting landscape, and many people would look at that idea that you raised as being something that young folk and millennials are most guilty of. People would just put the blame on the young folk for being like that, and it's the old, that's the way the world is today, because, blame young people for how it is today, and back in my day it would have been different, blah, blah, blah. But then you look at all these domestic sporting competitions, and they are all run and organized by older people, and they are all looking for other people or other organizations to help them. They are looking for Sky Sport to help them. They are looking for other media outlets to cover their competitions. They are looking for, they can't do this or can't do that because they don't have the money to pay this person to do it or this person to do it. They are constantly and pretty much only looking for other people to help them, instead of coming up with creative and invigorating and unique ways of promoting their own sport with the resources that they have. Does that make sense in how those two ideas apply in our conversations?
Absolutely. You can summarize it as saying people are looking for pre-internet solutions to post-internet problems, can't you? Just try to do it the way things have been done before. And that's this is complacency again. I was thinking about this just in the car this morning, and I've just had this flashback right now to remember this. I was thinking about, I can't remember, there's something on the radio, and they were talking about I don't know, I forget exactly what it was, but it was someone was complaining about change, and things were changing, and someone was kicking up a fuss. So why can't we have our stuff back, or whatever it was? I think it might have even been a climate change based thing, which sort of goes against the grain of what I would normally be saying here. But like, obviously you want to do your best to sort out the implications of those kinds of things. But there is an idea I had thinking about that, where it was like, people seem to be in a point in human history where like we've built up to this moment and things are quite stable, and we have this economy, and they were talking about the economy at heaps on the radio as well, and it was like, this stuff is all made up. It's like, as soon as people stop focusing, like as soon as people stop believing in the value of a dollar, suddenly the middleman disappears and we're back to a bartering economy, and money is worthless and meaningless. And a lot of times I think that's maybe where we should be. But like there's a feeling like, okay, we have, like, I own this house, therefore this house should always be mine, and if anything changes, then we need to resist that change. But like, I think we talked about change a lot last time, didn't we? And being able to roll with it. And the fact is that the Earth isn't going to, the Earth is going through its own rotations, its own natural cycles, and circumstances are going to change, and what you have now won't always be what you have. And this is exactly the same thing that you see in I say in America, but it's in Europe. It's all the, like, the rising nationalist things. It's like, let's get back to the way we were 50 years ago when things were good. It's like, well, good for who, first of all? And second of all, like, what was right then isn't what's going to be right next time. Like, you can't just get to a point where you're comfortable, you're safe, and therefore this is the way it should always be. But that's exactly how, like, well, for one thing, conservative politics, but it's not just that. It's generally how people of a certain age start thinking. Is like, they've worked so hard to this point, they stop working to the next point and say, well, no, I'm dropping anchor here. I'm like, this is where I'm going to stay, and I'm going to resist all alternatives to this, whereas nothing else stops moving, and so you're just going to be left behind at that point. And if you're thinking of pre-internet solutions to a post-internet problem when it comes to these kind of things, how are we going to, and sports broadcasting is certainly in that category, not just broadcasting, but media promotion, all of these things, like, you're just digging yourself a bit of a hole, aren't you?
You definitely are, and I've absorbed a lot of Gary Vee content over the years, and he's always reminding people of how good everything is right now. People in society, like, society is fantastic. Everyone likes to complain about everything and how shit everything is, but on the whole, we're living a pretty good life at the moment, and you can kind of sense it in New Zealand. Like, there is definitely a lot of lower income communities, poor people, there's poverty, there's all sorts of, bullshit going on, but there's also a lot of people making a lot of money. There's construction industry, there's a lot of, you just drive around, you're seeing a lot of trucks, you're seeing a lot of SUVs, you're seeing a lot of people living a fairly comfortable life, and I think that breeds a lifestyle or a community where everyone complains about stuff that shouldn't be complained about, or no one's willing to do something themselves because they don't have to, because you have the money to pay someone else to do it, because life is fairly rosy for a lot of people in New Zealand. And I guess if you want to talk on a deeper level, as we suggested we would, do you sense that something's about to change, or do you kind of see everything, because it can't be this good for this long? Like, something's going to have to give, whether it's countries going to war, whether it's just a crash of some sort, whether it's just people, because I have an idea. It's not my idea. I definitely believe we're moving into the Aquarius age, and there's a lot of stuff happening. There's a lot of changes happening in the world, and these are the growing pains. This is the short-term pain for the long-term gain that we're going to, trying to adjust to how the world is supposed to be moving forward. So how do you kind of envision the the leveling out process happening. Like, I don't want to say that, something bad is going to happen and then we have to deal with that, but I think there just needs to be a leveling out process to offer a bit more of a reality check to people on this planet. How do you sense that kind of energy shifting and changing, or something happening?
So I don't think we're yeah, I don't think it's a matter of something is going to change so much as I think it's a matter of something needs to change. But it's very hard to get people when they're complacent to shake themselves out of that illusion, and it is an illusion, isn't it? Because like you, it's tricky because it's I don't know. I think I'm a relatively countercultural person anyway, which means that I'm looking at it from a different lens. But when you do break that illusion, it's very hard to get it back again. It's just a matter of how do you get through to people to see that like the way they're living might be the best for them, but it's not the best for the community necessarily. It's not the best for the society, and it's not the best for the country. It's not necessarily the best for the whole planet. And I think the planet is the major one, because that's the one thing that is like actually marching onwards. Is the I'm not going to say the I'm not going to say climate change, because I think it's much bigger than that. I think it's a wide-scale environmental crisis, because climate change tends to be, first of all, it's divisive for dumb reasons, because people are complacent and they refuse to accept responsibility for things that are partly their fault. Certainly, at least, if not their fault directly, then things they're implicit in because of their way of life. And it's people who don't realize they're doing anything wrong, so they don't want to accept blame for something they don't know about. But yeah, okay, divisive issue. It shouldn't be scientifically, scientific consensus on the matter, but I also think it's stupid just to focus things specifically on, for example, carbon emissions, because I think it's so much wider than that. When you look at the quality of water, when you look at the deforestation, which also affects the ability to sequester water in the land, and mass farming, not mass farming, over farming the land destroys the topsoil, which makes it harder to have agricultural businesses. Look at the animals that are going extinct. Like, it's a massive, wide-scale thing, and it's all interrelated. And I think if you solved the deforestation that's going on, and particularly around the Amazonian region, where most of the rainforests in the world are, but even just on a level, I guess everyone's got to stop basically. Not stop, but be more sustainable, because the fact of unfiltered, unregulated free market capitalism is that you are working towards exponential and eternally exponential growth on a planet which has finite resources. So eventually you're going to hit a point of no return there, and that's the point, I suppose, which you could say we're coming to, where something will change. So I don't know, maybe we are building towards that point, but it's tricky to shake people out of the illusion, eh? It's tricky to shake people into action when their lives are inaction, when so much is done for them and you don't have to worry about those things. Like, it would be so much easier if people just tried to live more sustainably. And it's hard, because I think the easiest solution I see for this is for businesses and stuff to just get on the trend, and it is becoming very trendy to be sustainable, to well-being, the well-being sort of culture and these kind of things. Like, it's becoming trendy enough that it's a selling point, that I think we're going to see this sort of permeating through. But I also can't help but feel like big businesses are also the bulk of the problem. So are we just indulging, like, are we just trying to find a solution within a system that itself is the problem? Obviously that's not going to help. So yeah, I don't know. I guess it's up for smarter people than me to figure this one out.
I do think that it's about, for just normal people, it's about having the tools to be able to thrive in the chaos and thrive as all the systems in our world basically breaks down around us. Like, I think that's the journey I've been on, and I think that's the journey you've been on. I think that's the journey a lot of other people have been on, acquiring information, acquiring helpful things to do to get the best out of yourself, is having all the tools to thrive in that situation. And I think for a lot of people, the complacency and having everything so easy means that they haven't had to, or they haven't sought that information, they haven't sought those tools, and that's going to present an interesting situation whenever it does happen. Is you're going to have people who are positioned, poised, and equipped to rise and to thrive in the chaos, and we know that chaos is a ladder and it presents opportunities. And then you're going to have other people who have been getting fat and have been enjoying this rosy run that we've had for the last 10 years. Is like the Gary Vee talks about the last like major financial crisis, which was 2008, but things have been on a growing, like things have been growing exponentially for 20-30 years. So it's kind of that kind of bubble of growth has to burst at some point, and that's when you're going to find that some people, they've been getting fat and they don't know how to adjust to this new world, this new life. Other people, they have been learning, they've been equipping themselves for that moment, not in a doomsday prepper scenario, but in ensuring that you have the information that you need, ensuring that you are strong within yourself and you are ready to step up in that chaos and take the opportunities that will be presented to whoever is open to them.
Yeah, you sort of sparked I won't quite say epiphany, but certainly a thought there on that idea about like people being used to having things done for them. Like if you're I don't know, if your sink blocks up, you call in a plumber. If the wiring in your house is faulty, you call in an electrician. Like obviously these are very skilled, specific skilled roles which require a certain amount of training in order to be able to perform them. But I think that kind of attitude is one that permeates a lot deeper as well in people's lives, to where like I guess it's just, maybe this is a matter of the way that the economic system works, which is where you find the thing that you're good at and you sort of exploit it for financial gain as best you can. Maybe exploit isn't the right word, I don't know, but like I can't help but feel I've seen a few people sort of speculating that these days it's in like a post-internet thing again. Like it's less about being a specialist in any particular task and more about, rather than specializing in one, it's about being a jack of all trades. And I was just thinking about that in terms of like how people live, and thinking, sort of 300 years ago, people would live in smaller communities and more of a village lifestyle kind of thing. Maybe I have to go back further than 300 years, I'm not sure. It depends where you are, I guess. And like, okay, you would have, say, a blacksmith, and you would have, say, a town baker or something like that, but a lot of those menial house tasks, you would have to do them yourselves, or you wouldn't get them done. And maybe that's more of a direction where we're starting to head now, where people are having to learn a lot of different skills rather than being a specialist in one, because that's the way you got to be if you're going to get ahead, because there's just too much competition otherwise. So I don't know. That's certainly something that we do at the Niche Cache, isn't it? It's like our thing is we've had to be the writers, the producers, the entrepreneurs, the advertisers, the marketing team. All the various tasks that it takes. We basically just do them ourselves, because that's, first of all, the easiest way to do it, is because you can trust yourself better than you can trust someone else. But second of all, it's just like an essential way to do it. And I guess this is an internet thing as well. There's a lot of very negative and troubling things that have come with the internet. There's also a way of opening everything up to everyone else, where you can learn these skills by just watching a YouTube video for 20 minutes or whatever. Like, it's doable, it's possible. So I don't know, maybe that's more of a wider trend that we're going to see in not just in sort of our realm, but in also, I guess, the job industries and stuff like that. Maybe people are going to have to just start being more being, just being more widely skilled rather than being specifically skilled. I don't think that would be a terrible thing.
Like, do you think the phrase "jack of all trades, master of none" existed 500, 600,000 years ago? Like,
500,
I
6,000
don't,
years
I
ago. I mean, sure, the dinosaurs.
no,
had
like
to do a bit.
500 or 600 or 1,000 years ago.
Okay, right.
They're all separate
Yeah, no,
entities.
I don't think so. But yeah, I doubt it did. But it probably did just because people don't change. I think you're welcome to disagree with this, but it is my belief that human nature is a stable and unchanging thing. I think people are the way people have always been. It's just that technology changes, circumstances change, societies change, these kind of things. These are all external things, though, and I guess it's all part of the illusion because there is an essential core to people which is, untouched, but sometimes, and probably a lot more than sometimes, to be honest, are buried by these other external factors. So, but yeah, no, I think that if you go back that many, I just read a book on a biography on Shakespeare, actually, and I didn't realize he was also an actor in the plays that he wrote often. Not like a lead actor, but he would be one of the guys who would fill in a small role just because someone had to do it. And he also, after a while, not at first, he sort of had to work his way up, but when they built the Globe Theatre, like, he was an investor in that as well as being the main playwright. And like, just thinking about this dude 500 years ago, more than that, I think. I know about that. Jesus Christ, I can't do my maths in my head on the fly. But yeah, something in that 400 to 500 range. Like, this many years ago, he was doing that himself. Okay, he was probably the master of writing plays. He's probably the master of that trade. But that doesn't, like, how about jack of all trades, master of one? Like, that probably works better. Maybe, I don't know.
It's such an interesting idea because the people I look up to and probably the people that you look up to aren't masters at one thing. They might be masters at multiple things, thus they are exceptionally good at being jack of all trades. And the idea of being the idea of being a master in previous civilizations would have been pretty crazy, because I don't think you have that luxury of choice. I think it's a choice. Like, we now have the luxury of choice, and if I want to be a master at one thing, or I want to have a job in one line of work, or I want to focus my energy towards one thing, it's possible now. But when that choice is taken away, what are you going to do? Because suddenly you have to apply your skills over a far broader canvas. You can't just focus your energy on one thing, and that's maybe where you're going to see people encounter some difficulties, because the skills they have been applying to master one thing don't apply to other things, and they don't know how to adapt. They don't know how to move through the different silos of their life. They don't know how to, I'm going to do this task and focus my energy on this for a couple of days, hours, whatever it is, then we're going to move, and I've got a situation over here that I need to deal with. I'm going to take care of that. I think it's a choice, and at the moment we have that luxury of choice, whereas in the past, if you were living in some previous civilization, you had to be able to hunt. You had to be able to be creative and tell stories. You had to do so many different things, and that came together for the betterment of your community, of your tribe, of your group. Whereas now I think that, like, you had to be good at different things because you had to. It wasn't because you chose to. That was just how you had to live. Whereas now everything's a bit easier, and so you can choose to just do one specific thing. And it's going to be interesting to see how that applies over the coming years, and whether that luxury is still going to be afforded to people.
Well, I'm definitely of the opinion that one of the big problems in all this is that those tribes, those groups, those communities that we live in have gotten too big. Like, and I'm not going to come out here being like a National Party anti-UN kind of thing here, because I don't think globalism is the problem, but I do think that strict globalism is an issue in as much as it distracts us from our communities. Like, people, you get these like bloody absolute muppets on Twitter's quite famous for them, because at least on Facebook they're hidden in their little groups, which we don't have to see. People spinning their anti-globalism kind of ideas, and it's like, okay, you're ranting against this, like, you don't like immigrants, okay, you're a racist, I get it, but do you even talk to your neighbor? Like, have you even, like, would you go and visit them if you needed something? But would you, like, do you know their names even? Like, this is the kind of thing, is that people get distracted, and I don't know, people look at a wider picture, which is, first of all, an illusion, a fake. It's not the problem that they think it is, but second of all, like, it's you're a hypocrite if you think that without even embracing your own individual community. And Russell Brand talks about this idea of anarcho-syndicalism, which is where you take away big governments. You might still have big governments just for, like, practical reasons, but for the most part, your community is based in a smaller township type things, and you get back to those sort of ideas where one business runs here, and they might, there's no rival business there except in the next town over, and then maybe they share resources. And there's a book by Douglas Rushkoff called Team Human, which he wrote earlier this year, and he went on Russell Brand's podcast, which is where I heard about it. I heard him on one or two other podcasts as well. He talks about this kind of idea a lot, which unfortunately I don't have the cranial capacity to spit out the exact, like, the full-on details and all this, but it's super interesting how he talks about this alternative way of living, which would just be so much simpler and easier.
Cheer to that. Do you have any other little talking points you want to explore?
Probably 1,000 or so, but maybe we don't need to go on that long recording. I don't know.
No, I think we'll wrap it up there for episode 2 of this Niche Cast Patreon extravaganza. This one will be open to everyone to listen to, and so will the next one, the third one, and then after that we'll strip it back just to keep it for our patrons and provide them with the goodies. To support us on Patreon, just hit up a link, patreon.com/LEL Niche Cache. You'll find the link everywhere. Just do your best you can. Don't need to break the bank for us. Just support us as we endeavour to provide alternative and independent Kiwi sports media discussion and stuff and antics and shenanigans, and you know how we roll. Getting a bit funky, getting a bit spiritual, getting a bit deep and meaningful with it as well. So stay beautiful, stay positive, and hopefully you learn something a little bit from this episode as well. So go out and acquire different skills, learn different things in your life, whatever it is. Just follow your passions and follow what you enjoy doing. Learn more about that and just keep switching it up. Get some variety in your life, try new things, and acquire those skills. So stay beautiful, stay positive, and we'll see you next time. Cheer.